My name is Thomas McKenzie, and I've spent the last 15 years cutting timber in the forests of northern Minnesota. At 38 years old, I've grown accustomed to the solitude of the wilderness, the rhythm of my axe against ancient oaks, and the simple life of a man who asks for little beyond honest work and peaceful sleep. I come to town only when necessity demands it for supplies, tools, or the occasional letter from my sister back in Boston. The bustling market square of Pine Ridge always feels overwhelming after weeks in the quiet forest, with its cacophony of voices, creaking wagon wheels, and the general chaos of human commerce. It was a crisp October morning in 1857 when I made my monthly trip to town. The autumn air carried the scent of wood smoke and dying leaves, and I was looking forward to completing my business quickly and returning to the tranquil embrace of the forest. I had a list of supplies to gather: flour, salt, coffee, and a new blade for my saw. The market was busier than usual, filled with farmers selling their harvest and traders hawking their wares. I moved through the crowd with the awkward gait of a man more comfortable among trees than people, my weathered hands clutching a small leather pouch containing my modest earnings. I was examining a display of iron tools when I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. It was the unmistakable clank of chains, followed by a whimper so soft and broken that it barely registered above the market noise. Turning toward the sound, I saw something that would haunt me for the rest of my days. In a shadowy corner between two merchant stalls, a girl who couldn't have been more than 16 sat chained to a wooden post. Her wrists were raw and bloody from the iron shackles, and her clothes, if the tattered rags could be called that, hung from her thin frame like remnants of a scarecrow. But it was her eyes that stopped me cold. They were the color of storm clouds, wide with a terror so profound it seemed to have carved itself into her very soul. When our gazes met across the crowded market, I saw something flicker in those depths, a desperate plea for help that no words could have conveyed more clearly. Fresh stock from the territories. I heard a gruff voice say behind me, "Young, strong, good for breeding or field work." I turned to see a heavy-set man in a stained vest approaching the girl. His face was flushed with drink, and his small eyes gleamed with the calculating look of a man who saw human beings as nothing more than livestock. "How much for the girl?" asked another voice, a well-dressed gentleman with a gold watch chain glinting across his vest. $50, replied the trader. "She's healthy, despite appearances. A few good meals, and she'll be worth twice that." My hands clenched into fists. I had heard rumors of such things, the illegal slave trade that still operated in the shadows despite the war that had supposedly ended such horrors 20 years ago. But seeing it with my own eyes, witnessing this child's degradation in broad daylight, filled me with a rage I had never experienced. "I'll take her," I said, stepping forward before I could think better of it. The trader looked me up and down, taking in my rough clothes and calloused hands. "You got $50, lumberjack?" I reached into my pouch and counted out the money, nearly every cent I had earned from my last timber sale. It was supposed to last me through the winter, money for food and supplies that would keep me alive during the harsh Minnesota cold. "Here," I said, placing the coins in his greedy palm. The transaction was completed with disgusting efficiency. The trader unlocked the girl's chains and shoved her toward me like a sack of grain. She stumbled and would have fallen if I hadn't caught her arm gently, carefully, as if she were made of spun glass. "You're safe now," I whispered, the words coming from somewhere deep in my chest. "I promise you're safe." She looked up at me with those storm cloud eyes, and I saw something I hadn't expected: confusion. As if the concept of safety was so foreign to her that she couldn't comprehend what I meant. "What's your name?" I asked softly. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her lips moved silently, as if she had forgotten how to speak, or perhaps had been forbidden to do so for so long that her voice had simply disappeared. "It's all right," I said. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to." I looked around the market, suddenly aware that we were drawing attention. Some people stared with curiosity, others with disapproval, and a few with the kind of interest that made my skin crawl. I needed to get her away from here, somewhere safe, where she could begin to heal from whatever horrors she had endured. "Can you walk?" I asked. She nodded slightly, though I could see her legs trembling with exhaustion and malnutrition. "My cabin is about 5 miles north of town," I explained. "It's not much, but it's warm and safe. Will you come with me?" For a long moment, she just stared at me. I realized she was trying to determine if I was simply another kind of threat, another person who would use and hurt her. The thought that she might see me as just another predator made my heart ache. "I won't hurt you," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. "I swear on my mother's grave, I will never hurt you." Something in my voice must have convinced her, because she gave the smallest of nods. I had brought my horse and wagon to town, intending to load them with supplies. Instead, I helped the girl onto the wagon seat and covered her with my own coat. She was so thin that the heavy wool garment seemed to swallow her entirely. The ride to my cabin was conducted in silence. I didn't want to overwhelm her with questions or conversation, and she seemed incapable of speech. But I was acutely aware of her presence beside me. The way she flinched at every sudden sound. How she kept glancing at me as if expecting me to suddenly reveal my true, malevolent nature. My cabin sat in a clearing surrounded by towering pines, a simple but sturdy structure I had built with my own hands. It consisted of 2 rooms, a main living area with a stone fireplace and kitchen, and a smaller bedroom. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean, warm, and most importantly, it was safe. "This is home," I said as I helped her down from the wagon. "Such as it is." She stood in the clearing, looking around with those wide eyes. I wondered what she was thinking, if she was planning an escape route, or simply trying to process the reality of being in a place where no one was shouting at her or threatening her with violence. Inside the cabin, I lit the fire and put water on to boil. The girl stood near the door, as if ready to flee at the first sign of danger. "Are you hungry?" I asked. She nodded, so slightly I almost missed it. I had some bread and dried meat, simple fare but nourishing. I prepared a plate and set it on the table, then stepped back to give her space. "Please," I said, gesturing to the food. "Eat as much as you want." She approached the table like a wild animal approaching a trap, every muscle tense and ready to bolt. When she finally took a piece of bread, she ate it so quickly, I was afraid she would choke. "Slow down," I said gently. "There's plenty more. You don't have to rush." But she continued to eat with desperate hunger, as if she couldn't quite believe the food wouldn't be taken away from her. Watching her, I felt a fury building in my chest, not at her, but at whoever had done this to her, whoever had reduced this young woman to such a state of terror and starvation. When she had finished eating, I showed her to the bedroom. "This is yours," I said. "I'll sleep by the fire. The door has a lock on the inside. Use it if it makes you feel safer." She looked at the bed, a simple frame with a cornhusk mattress and clean blankets, as if she had never seen such luxury. "There are clean clothes in the chest," I added. "They belonged to my sister when she visited last year. They might be a bit large, but they're better than what you're wearing." For the first time since I had seen her in the market, something like hope flickered in her eyes. "I'll be right outside if you need anything," I said. "But I won't come in unless you ask me to. You have my word." I closed the door and heard the soft click of the lock engaging. The sound filled me with both relief and sadness. Relief that she felt secure enough to protect herself. Sadness that she felt the need to do so. I sat by the fire, staring into the flames and trying to process what I had done. In the space of a few hours, I had spent my entire winter savings to purchase a human being from a slave trader. I had brought a traumatized young woman to my isolated cabin, and now I was responsible for her safety and well-being. The rational part of my mind told me I was insane. I knew nothing about this girl, where she came from, what she had endured, or even if she wanted my help. For all I knew, she might try to rob me, or worse. But looking into those storm cloud eyes, I had seen something that overrode all rational thought: pure, desperate need. I had always been a solitary man, content with my own company and the simple rhythms of forest life. I had never married, never felt the desire for companionship beyond the occasional letter from my sister or conversation with fellow loggers. But something about this girl had awakened a protective instinct I didn't know I possessed. As I sat by the fire, I heard soft sounds from the bedroom: the rustle of fabric, the creak of floorboards, the gentle splash of water from the wash basin I had left for her. Each sound was a small victory, evidence that she was beginning to trust her surroundings enough to tend to her basic needs. Hours passed before I heard the lock click again. The door opened just a crack, and I saw one storm cloud eye peering out at me. "I'm still here," I said softly, still keeping watch. The door opened wider, and she stepped out wearing one of my sister's dresses. It was indeed too large for her slight frame, but it was clean and whole, and it covered the evidence of whatever abuse she had suffered. Her hair, now washed, fell in dark waves around her shoulders. "Beth," I asked. She nodded, and for the first time, I saw the ghost of what might have been a smile. "What should I call you?" I asked. "You don't have to tell me your real name if you don't want to, but I need something to call you." She opened her mouth, and this time, a sound emerged, barely a whisper, but audible. "Sarah," she said, her voice like autumn leaves rustling in the wind. "Sarah," I repeated. "That's a beautiful name." "I'm Thomas, but most people call me Tom." She nodded, and I saw her shoulders relax slightly. "Sarah," I said carefully, "I want you to know that you're free here. You can leave whenever you want, go wherever you want. But if you'd like to stay, you're welcome for as long as you need." "What?" she whispered, the word barely audible. It was a fair question, and one I wasn't sure I could answer adequately. "Because everyone deserves to be safe," I said finally. "And because when I saw you in that market, I saw someone who needed help. I couldn't just walk away." She studied my face for a long moment, as if trying to read the truth in my features. "Thank you," she whispered. Those two words, spoken in that broken voice, meant more to me than any payment or praise I had ever received. As I watched her retreat to the safety of the bedroom, I realized that my life had changed irrevocably. I was no longer just Thomas McKenzie, the solitary lumberjack. I was now someone's protector, someone's hope for a better future. The responsibility was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. But as I settled down by the fire for what would be the first of many nights as Sarah's guardian, I felt a sense of purpose I had never experienced before. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever demons from her past might follow her, I would be ready. I had given her my word that she was safe, and I intended to keep that promise no matter what it cost me. The first weeks with Sarah were like trying to tame a wounded wild animal. She moved through my cabin like a ghost, always alert, always ready to flee. Every unexpected sound made her flinch. Every sudden movement sent her retreating to the safety of her room. But slowly, incrementally, I began to see small signs of progress. It started with the way she watched me work. I had taken to doing my carpentry and tool maintenance inside the cabin rather than in my usual workshop. Partly because the October weather was turning cold, but mostly because I sensed she felt safer when she could see what I was doing. She would sit in the corner, wrapped in one of my sister's shawls, observing my every movement with those storm cloud eyes. "I'm making a new handle for my axe," I explained one morning, holding up the piece of hickory I was shaping. The old one cracked when I was felling a particularly stubborn oak. She didn't respond verbally, but I saw her lean forward slightly, interested despite herself. "Would you like to see how it's done?" I asked. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. I showed her how to select the right grain in the wood, how to shape it with careful knife work, how to sand it smooth so it wouldn't raise blisters on working hands. She watched with the intensity of someone who had learned that knowledge could mean the difference between survival and suffering. "My father taught me woodworking," I said as I worked. "He was a carpenter back in Boston," said a man who could work with his hands would never go hungry. "What happened to him?" Sarah asked, her voice still barely above a whisper but growing stronger each day. "Died when I was 20, I replied. "Fever took him and my mother both, within a week of each other. That's when I came west. Couldn't bear to stay in that house with all the memories." She was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "Thank you, it was a long time ago." I paused in my work. "What about your family, Sarah? Do you have people looking for you?" The question was a mistake. I saw it immediately in the way her face closed off, the way her body tensed as if preparing for a blow. She retreated to her room and didn't emerge for the rest of the day. I learned to be more careful with my questions after that, to let her share what she wanted when she was ready. Instead, I focused on creating an environment where she could begin to heal. I made sure there was always food available, that the cabin was warm and well lit, that she had space and privacy when she needed it. Gradually, she began to help with small tasks around the cabin. It started with clearing the table after meals, then progressed to helping with cooking and cleaning. I noticed she had a natural skill with domestic work, as if she had been trained in such things from a young age. "You're good at this," I observed one day as she kneaded bread dough with practiced efficiency. "I was taught," she said simply, "by your mother." Her hand stilled for a moment. "By the woman who owned me before." The casual way she said "Itaz," if being owned was simply a fact of life, made my chest tighten with anger. Not at her, but at the system that had reduced this intelligent, capable young woman to property. "You're not owned anymore," I said firmly. "You're free, Sarah, free to make your own choices, to come and go as you please." She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Am I?" "Of course you are. Why would you think otherwise?" "Because you paid for me," she said matter-of-factly. $50. "That makes me yours." I set down my coffee cup and turned to face her fully. "Sarah, listen to me. I didn't buy you. I bought your freedom. There's a difference, is there?" Her question hung in the air between us, and I realized how naive I had been to think that simply telling her she was free would make it so. Freedom was more than just the absence of Chensit, was a state of mind, a belief in one's own worth and agency, and Sarah had been conditioned to believe she was property for so long that the concept of true freedom was foreign to her. "Yes," I said firmly. "There is a difference, and I'll prove it to you." The next morning, I hitched up my wagon and asked Sarah to come with me to town. "Why?" she asked, fear creeping into her voice. "Because there's something I need to show you." She was reluctant, but she trusted me enough now to agree. The ride to Pine Ridge was tense. I could feel her anxiety radiating from her like heat from a forge. When we reached the town, I drove directly to the office of Judge Harrison, the local magistrate, Tom McKenzie. The judge greeted me as we entered his office. "What brings you to town? And who's this young lady?" "This is Sarah," I said. "I need you to draw up some papers for her." "What kind of papers?" "Freedom papers. Legal documentation that she's a free woman, not bound to any person or obligation." Judge Harrison looked between Sarah and me with curiosity. "That's an unusual request, Tom. May I ask why such papers are necessary?" "Because she needs to know, legally and officially, that she belongs to no one but herself." The judge was a good man, and he asked no further questions. Within an hour, he had prepared a document declaring Sarah to be a free woman, with all rights and privileges accorded to citizens of the United States, bound to no person, and owned by none. "There," I said, handing her the papers. "Now it's official. You're free, Sarah, completely and legally free." She stared at the document as if it were written in a foreign language. "What does this mean?" "It means you can leave right now if you want to. You can go anywhere, do anything. You can stay with me or find somewhere else to live." The choice is entirely yours." For a moment, I thought she might actually leave. She looked toward the door, then back at the papers, then at me. I held my breath, realizing that I desperately wanted her to choose to stay, but knowing that the choice had to be hers alone. "I'd like to go back to the cabin," she said finally. "Of course, it's your home too, for as long as you want it to be." On the ride back, she was quieter than usual, but it was a different kind of quiet, thoughtful rather than fearful. That evening, as we sat by the fire, she spoke more than she had since arriving. "I was born on a plantation in Georgia," she said suddenly. "My mother was a house slave, my father was the master's son." I kept my expression neutral, though my heart ached. For her, when the war ended, we were supposed to be free, but the master's family lost everything, and they sold some of us to pay their debts. I was 12. "Sarah, you don't have to. I want to tell you," she said firmly. "You deserve to know what you've taken on." She told me about the years that followed being sold from one owner to another, each situation worse than the last. She spoke of back-breaking labor, of hunger and cold, of punishments that left scars both visible and invisible. She told me about the trader who had brought her north, promising work in a factory, but delivering her instead to the slave market where I had found her. "I stopped believing in freedom a long time ago," she said when she finished. "It seemed like a story, people told to make themselves feel better about the world. And now?" I asked gently. She looked at the freedom papers, which she had been holding throughout her story. "Now I'm starting to think maybe it's real. Maybe it's something I can actually have." "It is real, Sarah, and it's yours." That night marked a turning point in our relationship. Sarah began to emerge from her shell, to show glimpses of the person she had been before the world tried to break her. She was intelligent and curious, with a dry sense of humor that caught me off guard. She had opinions about things, books, politics, the way I cooked my eggs, and she wasn't afraid to express them. "You read too fast," she observed one evening as I worked my way through a novel by the firelight. "Too fast. You're not savoring it. A good book should be like a fine meal enjoyed slowly, not devoured." "I didn't know you could read," I said, then immediately regretted the assumption. "The master's daughter taught me," she said without offense. She thought it would be amusing to have a slave who could read to her. She didn't realize she was giving me the greatest gift of my life. I handed her the book. "Would you like to read to me?" She took it with reverence, running her fingers over the leather cover. "I'd like that very much." Her voice, when she read, was transformed. The hesitant whisper became rich and melodious, bringing the characters to life with subtle inflections and perfect timing. I found myself looking forward to our evening reading sessions as much as any part of the day. As autumn turned to winter, Sarah became more confident in expressing her own wants and needs. She rearranged the furniture to suit her preferences, added touches of beauty to the stark cabin, wildflowers in mason jars, colorful quilts she sewed from fabric scraps, curtains for the windows. "It feels more like a home now," I told her one evening as we sat by the fire. "It is a home," she replied. "The first real home I've ever had. The first snow fell in late November, blanketing the forest in pristine white." Sarah had never seen snow before. The plantations where she had lived were too far south, and her wonder at the transformation was infectious. "It's like the whole world has been made new," she said, standing at the window and watching the flakes fall. "Would you like to go out in it?" I asked. She nodded eagerly, and I bundled her up in my sister's winter coat and boots. We walked through the forest, leaving the first tracks in the virgin snow. Sarah actually laughed when I showed her how to make snow angels, and the sound was like music after months of whispers and silence. "I never imagined anything could be so beautiful," she said, catching snowflakes on her tongue, watching her discover joy in simple pleasures. I realized that I was falling in love with her, not the desperate, possessive kind of love that sought to own and control, but something deeper and more respectful, a love that wanted nothing more than to see her flourish and be happy. But I kept these feelings to myself. Sarah was still healing, still learning to trust, and the last thing she needed was the pressure of my romantic feelings. She had been used and exploited by men her entire life. I would not add to that burden. Instead, I focused on being her friend, her protector, her safe harbor in a world that had shown her little kindness. And if sometimes I caught her looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, if sometimes our hands brushed as we worked together and she didn't pull away, I told myself not to read too much into it. Christmas came, and I wanted to give her something special, not because I expected anything in return, but because she deserved to experience the joy of receiving a gift freely given. I had been working in secret on a small wooden jewelry box, carved with intricate patterns and lined with soft fabric. "What's this?" she asked when I presented it to her on Christmas morning. "A gift," I said simply, "because everyone should have something beautiful that belongs only to them." She opened the box, and her eyes filled with tears. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever owned. You deserve beautiful things, Sarah. You deserve everything good this world has to offer." She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her expression, a recognition, perhaps of the feelings I had been trying so hard to hide. "Tom," she said softly, "there's something I need to tell you." My heart stopped. Was she going to leave? Had I overstepped somehow? I love you, she said simply. I know I shouldn't. I know it's complicated, but I do. You saved my life, and then you gave me something even more precious. You gave me back myself. The words hung in the air between us, and I felt as if the world had shifted on its axis. Sarah, I said carefully, are you sure? I don't want you to feel obligated. I'm not, she interrupted. This isn't gratitude, Tom. This is choice. My choice, made freely, with a clear mind and an open heart. I reached for her hands, holding them gently. I love you too, I said. I have 4 weeks now, but I was afraid to say anything, afraid you might think I had ulterior motives for helping you. I know you didn't, she said. That's why I love you. You saw me as a person worth saving, not as something to be used. We were married in the spring, in a simple ceremony performed by Judge Harrison with the local minister presiding. Sarah wore a dress she had sewn herself from fabric I had bought in town white cotton with tiny blue flowers that matched her eyes. As we exchanged vows, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. A chance encounter in a market square had led to the greatest love of my life. I had thought I was saving her, but in truth, she had saved me too from a life of loneliness, from the emptiness of existing without purpose or connection. You're safe now, I had whispered to her that first day, and it had been true. But what I hadn't known then was that in making her safe, I had found my own safety, too, the safety of being truly known and loved by another person. Our first year of marriage was a revelation in the truest sense of the word. Every day brought new discoveries about each other, new layers of trust and intimacy that built upon the foundation we had established during those first tentative months. Sarah bloomed like a flower, finally given proper soil and sunlight, revealing depths of character and spirit that her previous circumstances had forced her to hide. She had a gift for making our simple cabin feel like a palace. Under her care, what had been a functional but stark dwelling became a warm, inviting home filled with small touches that spoke of love and attention to detail. She cultivated a garden that provided not only vegetables for our table, but herbs for cooking and healing. Her knowledge of medicinal plants, learned during her years of servitude, proved invaluable during the harsh Minnesota winters. Where did you learn about willowbark tea? I asked one evening as she prepared a remedy for my aching back after a particularly difficult day of tree felling. Old Martha, on the Williamson plantation, she replied, measuring the bark with practiced precision. She was the closest thing to a doctor we had, taught me that nature provides everything we need if we know where to look. I watched her work, marveling at the confidence with which she moved. This was a far cry from the terrified girl who had flinched at every shadow. Marriage had given her something I hadn't expected: authority over her own domain. In our home, she was the undisputed expert on matters of comfort, health, and domestic harmony. You should teach others, I suggested. There are women in town who would pay good money for remedies that actually work. She paused in her work, considering, do you think they would trust me, a former slave? They would trust your results, I said firmly. And anyone who wouldn't isn't worth your time anyway. The idea took root, and by summer, Sarah had established a small but growing practice as a healer. Word spread quickly through Pine Ridge and the surrounding farms about the lumberjack's wife who could cure everything from headaches to infected wounds. She never advertised her services, but people began appearing at our door with various ailments, and Sarah never turned anyone away. Mrs. McKenzie, said Mrs. Hartwell, the banker's wife, as she clutched a bottle of Sarah's cough syrup. This is the first thing that's helped my son's consumption in months. How much do I owe you? Whatever you think it's worth, Sarah replied, as she always did. Mrs. Hartwell pressed a silver dollar into Sarah's hand, more than fair payment for the remedy, but more importantly, she had called Sarah Mrs. McKenzie with genuine respect, treating her as an equal rather than a curiosity. These small victories meant everything to Sarah. Each person who sought her help, each successful treatment, each expression of gratitude was proof that she had value beyond what others might take from her. She was building a reputation based on her own skills and knowledge, creating an identity that belonged entirely to herself. But our happiness was not without its challenges. There were those in town who disapproved of our marriage, who whispered behind their hands about the lumberjack who had married that colored girl. Most people were decent enough to keep their opinions to themselves, but not everyone. You sure picked yourself a pretty one, sneered Jake Morrison, a local drunk who had cornered me outside the general store one afternoon. But don't you worry about her running off. Her kind ain't known for staying put. I grabbed him by the shirt front and lifted him off his feet. You will not speak about my wife that way, I said, my voice deadly quiet. In fact, you will not speak about my wife at all. Are we clear? Jake nodded frantically, and I released him. He stumbled away, muttering under his breath. But he never bothered us again. When I told Sarah about the encounter, she was quiet for a long moment. Does it bother you? She asked finally. The things people say? Only because it bothers you, I replied honestly. I couldn't care less what small-minded people think about us. Sometimes I wonder if I'm being selfish, she said. If my presence here makes your life harder? I took her hands in mine, looking directly into those storm cloud eyes that had first captured my heart. Sarah McKenzie, I said firmly, You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. You have made my life richer, happier, and more meaningful than I ever thought possible. Anyone who can't see that is blind, and their blindness is not our problem." She smiled then, that radiant smile that could light up the darkest winter day. "I love you, Thomas McKenzie. And I love you, Sarah McKenzie, always and forever." As our second year of marriage began, we faced a new challenge and a new joy. Sarah was pregnant. The news filled us both with excitement and terror in equal measure. We had talked about children, dreamed about them, but the reality of bringing a child into the world felt overwhelming. What if I don't know how to be a mother? Sarah worried as she knitted tiny booties by the fire. What if I don't know how to be a father? I countered. I think we'll figure it out together. You'll be a wonderful father, she said with certainty. You saved me when I was lost. You'll protect our child the same way, and you'll be an amazing mother. You have so much love to give, so much wisdom to share. The pregnancy was not easy. Sarah suffered from terrible morning sickness that lasted well into her second trimester, and I worried constantly about her health. But she was strong, stronger than either of us had realized, and she carried our child with a grace and determination that amazed me. I want to name him Thomas, she said one evening as she rubbed her growing belly, after his father. What if it's a girl? I asked. Then we'll name her Hope, she said without hesitation. Because that's what you gave me, hope for a better future. Our daughter was born on a snowy February morning in 1889, after a labor that lasted nearly 20 hours. I had never felt so helpless as I did listening to Sarah's cries from the next room, where the midwife had banished me with strict instructions not to interfere. When Mrs. Patterson finally emerged with a tiny bundle in her arms, I thought my heart might burst from my chest. Congratulations, Tom, she said with a tired smile. You have a beautiful daughter. And Sarah is fine, exhausted, but fine. I rushed into the bedroom to find Sarah propped up against the pillows, holding our child with an expression of wonder and fierce protectiveness. Hello, Hope, I whispered, touching one tiny fist with my finger. Welcome to the world. Hope McKenzie was perfect in every way, 10 fingers, 10 toes, and her mother's storm cloud eyes. She was also loud, demanding, and completely disrupted every routine we had established. I had never been happier in my life. She's going to be trouble, Sarah said fondly, as Hope wailed her displeasure at being changed. She gets that from her mother, I replied, earning myself a playful swat. Watching Sarah with our daughter was like witnessing a miracle. All the maternal instincts that had been suppressed during her years of bondage emerged with stunning force. She was patient when Hope was fussy, gentle when she was frightened, and fiercely protective when anyone so much as looked at her wrong. No one will ever hurt you, I heard her whisper to Hope during late-night feedings. You will grow up free, and loved, and safe. I promise you that. Those whispered promises broke my heart and mended it at the same time. Sarah was determined that our daughter would never know the fear and degradation she had experienced. Hope would grow up knowing her own worth, confident in her place in the world, secure in the knowledge that she was loved unconditionally. As Hope grew from infant to toddler, our little family found its rhythm. I continued my work in the forest, but I made sure to be home every evening for dinner and bedtime stories. Sarah expanded her healing practice, often seeing patients, while Hope played at her feet. We were building something beautiful together, life based on love, respect, and mutual support. Mama, tell me the story, Hope would demand as Sarah tucked her into bed each night. Which story, sweetheart? The story about how Papa saved you. Sarah would glance at me, and I would nod encouragingly. It was important that Hope understand her family's history, even the difficult parts. Once upon a time, Sarah would begin, there was a brave lumberjack who saw a girl who needed help, and instead of walking away, he chose to be kind. And then, what happened? Then, the girl learned that she was worth saving. And the lumberjack learned that sometimes the best way to find happiness is to help someone else find theirs. And they lived happily ever after. They're still living happily ever after, Sarah would say, kissing Hope's forehead. Every single day. On Hope's 3rd birthday, we received an unexpected visitor. I was splitting wood behind the cabin when I heard a commotion from the front yard. Sarah's voice raised in surprise and what sounded like another woman crying. I hurried around the house to find Sarah embracing a young black woman I didn't recognize. Both women were weeping, and Hope was watching the scene with wide-eyed curiosity. Tom, Sarah called when she saw me. Come, meet my sister, your sister. I had never heard Sarah mention any family. This is Grace, Sarah said, her arms still around the other woman, my younger sister. I thought she was dead. Grace looked up at me with eyes that were unmistakably related to Sarah's, though hers held a wariness that reminded me painfully of how Sarah had looked when I first brought her home. You're the one who married my sister, Grace said, studying me carefully. I am, I replied, and you're welcome here for as long as you'd like to stay. I don't want to impose your family, I said firmly. Family is never an imposition. Grace had escaped from a plantation in Alabama and had been searching for Sarah for over a year. She had heard rumors about a healer in Minnesota who matched Sarah's description and had traveled north, hoping against hope that it might be true. I can't believe you're alive, Grace kept saying, holding Sarah's hands as if she might disappear. When they sold you, I thought I'd never see you again. I thought I'd never see you again. Thought the same thing, Sarah replied. How did you get away? Grace's story was harrowing, a tale of abuse, escape, recapture, and finally successful flight with the help of conductors on the Underground Railroad. She had been living in Chicago, working as a seamstress and trying to build a new life. When she heard the rumors about Sarah, "You can stay with us," Sarah said immediately. "We have room, and I could use help with my practice." "I don't want to be a burden, Grace," I interrupted gently. "My wife was alone in the world when I found her. Now she has family again. That's not a burden, that's a blessing." Grace did stay, and her presence transformed our household in wonderful ways. She was skilled with a needle and thread, and she helped Sarah expand her healing practice by creating beautiful professional-looking containers and labels for the remedies. She was also wonderful with Hope, who adored her Aunt Gracie and followed her around like a devoted puppy. "It's like having a piece of my childhood back," Sarah confided to me one evening as we watched Grace teach Hope to braid wildflowers. I had given up hope of ever seeing her again. "She's lucky to have found you," I said, "and we're lucky to have her." "Do you really mean that? Having 2 former slaves in your house can't be easy for you." I turned to face her fully, taking her hands in mine. "Sarah McKenzie, you are not a former slave in my house. You are my wife, the mother of my child, my partner, and everything that matters. Grace is not a burden, she's your sister, which makes her my sister too. This is your home, and anyone you love is welcome here." Tears filled her eyes. "How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," I said, kissing her forehead. "We found each other as I write this. 5 years have passed since that day in the market when I first saw Sarah chained to a post. Our daughter Hope is now a bright, confident 5-year-old who knows nothing of fear or bondage. Grace has married a good man from town, a blacksmith named Samuel, who treats her like the treasure she is. Sarah's healing practice has grown so successful that people travel from neighboring counties to seek her help. And I am no longer the solitary lumberjack who spoke only to trees and sky. I am a husband, a father, a brother-in-law, and a pillar of a community that has learned to value what we've built together. Sometimes when I'm working in the forest, I think about that moment when I first heard the clank of chains in the market square. What if I had walked away? What if I had minded my own business, as so many others did that day? But I didn't walk away. I chose to act, to risk everything I had for a stranger who needed help. And in saving her, I discovered that I had saved myself as well. "You're safe now," I had whispered to her that first day, and it was true. But what I know now is that safety, it isn't just about protection from harm, it's about being known, accepted, and loved for exactly who you are. Sarah gave me that safety just as surely as I gave it to her. We built a life together based on the simple truth that everyone deserves: dignity, respect, and love. It wasn't always easy, and there were those who tried to tear us down. But love, real love, is stronger than prejudice, stronger than fear, stronger than the small-minded cruelty that tries to divide us. Our story began with chains and ended with freedom. Not just Sarah's freedom, but the freedom that comes from choosing love over fear, compassion over indifference, hope over despair. And every day, as I watch my wife tend her garden, teach our daughter, and heal the sick, I am reminded that the best things in life come not from what we take, but from what we give freely to others. Sarah is safe now. We all are. And that safety, built on love and sustained by choice, is the greatest treasure any of us could ever possess. The end.